The courtroom was silent, too silent for what was about to happen. A little girl, no more than 3, stood on the wooden floor, her tiny hand clutching a worn teddy bear. At her side sat a massive police dog, his eyes steady, his presence calm. When the judge asked her to speak, she didn't look at him. She turned to the dog and whispered words that made even the hardest officers in the room wipe their eyes. The courtroom air felt heavy that day, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. The polished benches were filled with people, officers in uniform, lawyers in crisp suits, and families waiting for justice to be served. But all eyes kept drifting toward the smallest person in the room, a 3-year-old girl with wide, searching eyes and pigtails that swayed gently as she moved. She clutched a teddy bear to her chest, worn and patched in places, the kind of toy that had clearly been hugged through nights of fear. Beside her sat a police dog, a massive German shepherd named Coda. His fur was a mix of black and gold, his eyes deep and steady, the kind of eyes that didn't just look at you. They looked into you. This wasn't an ordinary day in court. The child had been called to give a statement, not to accuse, not to testify in the way adults did, but to share what she had seen, in her own words. Everyone feared it would be too much for someone so young. Weeks earlier, Coda had been assigned to the little girl after she was found alone, frightened, in a park at night. She hadn't spoken a word to anyone, not the officers who found her, not the social workers who gently asked her questions. Her fear ran too deep, wrapped around her like a blanket she couldn't set down. But something happened the moment she met Coda. He didn't speak. He didn't push. He simply sat beside her, lowering his massive head into her lap. And slowly, over hours, then days, she began to rest her hand on his fur. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was safe. Now, in this room filled with strangers, Coda lay at her side, his head resting near her shoes. The judge, an older man with a voice like worn leather, spoke gently. "Sweetheart, can you tell us what happened?" The girl didn't move at first. She pressed her face into her teddy bear. The room held still. Then, without looking at the judge, she bent toward Coda. Her small fingers tangled in his fur. She whispered, so softly that the microphone barely caught it. "I was scared. But you found me. The officers in the front." Rao sat straighter. The prosecutor leaned forward, straining to hear. She continued, her voice still directed at the dog. "You stayed with me. You didn't let the bad man come back." A ripple of emotion passed through the room. Someone sniffled quietly in the gallery. The defense lawyer's eyes dropped to the floor. Then came the words that no one expected. She rested her forehead on Coda's head and said, "You made me feel safe, so I can tell the truth now." And for the first time since she'd been found, she lifted her head and looked toward the judge. The fear was still in her eyes, but so was something else. Courage. She told the court, in the simplest, purest way, what had happened that night. No complicated details, just the truth as only a child could tell it. And because of her words, spoken, through the courage Coda had given her, justice moved forward that day. When she finished, the judge didn't speak right away. He removed his glasses, wiping his eyes before putting them back on. "Young lady," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "you are very brave." Coda stayed beside her as she stepped down, his tail swaying slowly, his presence steady as a wall. The courtroom, often a place of sharp words and cold procedure, had been changed by something silent and pure, a bond between a frightened child and a dog who had asked for nothing but trust. Long after the case closed, people in that courtroom would talk about that day, not because of the legal arguments or the verdict, but because they had seen what happens when fear meets unconditional loyalty. As one officer said later, Sometimes the strongest witness doesn't speak our language. Sometimes it just sits beside you until you're ready. If this story touched your heart, tell us where you're watching from in the comments. And subscribe for more stories that remind us that courage comes in all shapes, sizes, and sometimes on 4 legs.